Ladies and gentlemen, here we are back again on the Soul Sessions. I'm your host, Soul, but we have an interesting one today. Our second two-time guest. He started season 2 and he's coming back for more. Patrick Hickey Jr., CEO of Legacy Comics. Welcome back, my friend.
What's up, buddy? Happy to be here. Happy to talk comics. Happy to talk pro wrestling. Happy to talk a whole bunch of stuff. So I'm all yours.
Well, hey, we've got plenty of topics to go through. But Patrick, for our
Yeah,
viewers
man.
who may have not seen your season premiere episode, talk to us about yourself and your love of wrestling.
Yeah. So my name is Patrick Hickey Jr. I am the editor-in-chief and CEO of Legacy Comics in Brooklyn, New York. I'm also the editor-in-chief and owner of ReviewFix.com. I've been a full-time college professor for 17 years. I have covered pro wrestling as a journalist for just as long. I've interviewed everyone from Jeff Jarrett, Diamond Dallas Page, Daniel Bryan, Rey Mysterio, Dolph Ziggler, Paul Heyman, Harley Race, Loki. I mean, yeah, I've done my fair share of wrestling interviews. I've been a ring announcer for Battle Club Pro in Brooklyn, New York. I am the author of the Minds Behind the Games book series, which has 7 volumes in over 1,000 libraries worldwide, including Harvard, Yale, Stanford, UC Berkeley. Among the games in those books are several of the greatest wrestling games of all time. I've interviewed the developers, producers, of classic wrestling games like WCW versus the World, WWF No Mercy. Yeah, so I love wrestling. I love video games. I love comics. I've been involved in pro wrestling, so I'm like hardcore geek. So,
Oh, Patrick, they say Kenny Omega's the belt collector, but I think you are the title collector, a man of
I'm
many
trying,
titles.
man. Yeah, man.
You are getting it. But I want to talk about your Mind Behind series. You've got someone, the
Sure.
Sega Genesis, obviously Mega Drive here in the UK,
Yeah.
PlayStation, PS2, fighting games, adventure games, shooter games. So let's talk about, in wrestling terms first. One of the most classic, famous wrestling games is No Mercy.
Sure.
Talking about No Mercy in itself, why is that game so important in wrestling games in general?
So I just want to stress though how much that I love No Mercy. So this right here, it's a little blurry because of the blur background, is an RG351V. It is basically a handheld emulator.
Oh,
And I love No Mercy so much that I have No Mercy on it right here.
goddamn,
And I
multitasking. Love it.
and I have the Japanese version right here.
Oh, nice.
And I could play it whenever I want on the go. So like when I went to like Ric Flair's last match in Tennessee this summer, I was playing this on the go, and I sent a screenshot to Jeff Jarrett to show him that like, oh, I was playing WCW versus the World, and I was like, look, Jeff, you're in a wrestling game from like 30 years ago, and he was just like, shut up. But so I love pro wrestling games. And so the easy answer is like, why is No Mercy so beloved? It's because so many things came together for No Mercy. So this is the thing. If you've played WCW versus the World, that's where it all started.
Mhm.
So that game came out on the PlayStation. It still, I mean, the SmackDown game sold wonderfully, but WCW vs. the World is still massively playable. It's an amazing wrestling game. The characters move like super robotically, almost like Resident Evil style, but the game is still fun to play. It's still awesome. But what happened was after that game came out, it sold over 1 million copies, which is that's no easy job. The team behind that game was called the Man Breeze, which later became Aki.
Mm.
Okay. And they were like, yeah, listen, we don't ever want to develop on the PlayStation anymore, ever. So it originally started out as a Japanese wrestling game, and then THQ saw it and was like, "Yo, if we reskin this with WCW characters, we got money." So Sanders Keel is the American producer that saw the Japanese game, and then he did all the legwork to like bring the game together. I've interviewed him several times. He's an amazing dude, big horror film guy, super nice. So then what happened was, okay, you guys don't want to produce games on the PlayStation anymore. So where would you like to produce them? The Nintendo 64. So that's how we get WCW versus NWO World Tour, which sells even more than WCW versus the World. that game does gangbusters. They take it up another level with WCW NWO Revenge, which improves the graphics, improves the taunts, improves the moveset, the whole 9 yards. Then something strange happens. Aki and THQ lose the WCW license because WCW decides to go with Electronic Arts, which that's a story for another day. With WCW Mayhem, those games sold over 1 million copies too. So initially, EA was kind of like, "Yo, we left, but we were able to. They kept that success, because again, selling 1 million copies is nothing to laugh at." But so now, in like totally 90s wrestling, like THQ jumped ship to WWE or WWF at the time, and we get WrestleMania 2000, which takes revenge and then adds creative characters and adds a better story. So now it's like, oh my god, now you can customize characters. Now it's just it's game on. Like, this is WrestleMania 2000 just up the ante. Some people like Game Pro and a lot of like game critics at the time were like, oh, the graphics are stiff, blah blah blah. Blah. It's WrestleMania 2000 is top 5 wrestling game, period. Especially if you're an arcade wrestling fan. If you're somebody that likes more like sim stuff and you're a glutton for punishment, then you'll go for Fire Pro. I love the Fire Pro series, but it's not for everyone. So anyway, now after this, we get to No Mercy. What makes No Mercy so special? Sorry, I took the long way to answer your question, but I'm a historian, so I like to provide context. Better visuals, the best sound on a Nintendo 64 console that was notorious for producing terrible sound. I mean, there's not a game with a great soundtrack on the Nintendo 64. Even like if you put your ear next to the speaker for Ocarina of Time, you're like, oh my god, oh man, it's a great score, but it just doesn't. It's not projected properly through the Nintendo 64. The Nintendo 64 console just couldn't produce quality sound. So anyway, No Mercy has the best sound, the best visuals of all of those wrestling games from Aki. They have the lush creator wrestler system that's even been improved. They have a better story mode. The running grapples, that was a huge game changer. So it just had the most polish out of all of those Aki games. And then soon after, the Nintendo 64 was kind of like a thing of the past. And Aki left like wrestling game development, and they ended up getting the license to WCW again after EA kind of parted ways with Kodiak Interactive. And a lot of people don't know this, but the original Def Jam Vendetta was supposed to be a WCW game, and WCW got bought out by WWE, and EA had to scramble. So now imagine EA, they take the WCW license away from Aki, and now they're on the same team developing a wrestling game for WCW like 4 years later. WCW goes out of business. EA is like, oh my god, we're on the books to do a wrestling game with these people. What the hell are we going to do? And they end up getting the Def Jam license and making Def Jam Vendetta, which is pretty crazy. But again, to answer your question, because No Mercy just put it all together in a way that no other wrestling game had. But huge problem with No Mercy. The first 50,000 copies or so shipped without a battery.
Oh god.
Meaning the games did not save.
Well,
So
hey, if you're going for a
that-
speed run, that's a hell of a handicap.
But that pissed off a lot of people. So the game didn't sell nearly as well as, like, I'm pretty sure, I'm like 99.9% sure that Revenge, WCW NWO Revenge, is the best selling wrestling game on the Nintendo 64. It's not the best. It's probably like top 3 behind WrestleMania 2000 and No Mercy. But those 50,000 initial fans that bought the game had copies that had no battery, and they got so pissed off that many of them just returned it, and then they told all of their friends. THQ had to release another batch of cartridges that were fixed, but by then the damage had already been done. So it's kind of like a sad story that like No Mercy is just this amazing wrestling game that between the death of the Nintendo 64, or slow death, the system got retired, and this shipping issue, that it doesn't get the love that it deserves.
Aye, absolutely. There, it's not the days of now where day one patches save some games from
Absolutely.
craziness.
Yep.
We're dealing with the time as you buy a game on the store shelf, it's what you get. You ain't updating it. You ain't getting any patches. 100%.
Absolutely. it's like there's a glitch in WCW NWO Revenge where if you're being pinned and you spin the analog stick, your character will kick out. So a lot of people don't know that. So it's just like I've been in tournaments before and I'll do it like once or twice and then I'll just look at the person like, do you know? Because like I've ran tournaments like Smash Brothers tournaments over the years. I've run tons of No Mercy, revenge tournaments. I've run bridge tournaments where like round one was like WCW NWO World Tour. Then if you advanced, then it was Revenge. Then if you advanced to
Mhm.
the semifinals, then it was WrestleMania 2000. Then if you got to the finals, it was No Mercy. And it's been so much fun. It's like a celebration of all of those Aki games. But whenever we would play Revenge, I would just spin the joystick. Like somebody would hit me with a jackhammer and I'd kick out at like one, and they're like, "How'd you do that?" And I'm like, "You obviously don't know this game as well as you think you do, you know." So, but it's pretty funny. So then we'd end up having like this 30-minute match where everyone kept kicking out, and the only way to win is to knock the person out. So it's pretty crazy. So,
Those secret techniques. I mean, you should have
mm-hmm.
punished someone and make them play that terrible ECW game just as a wee
oh,
little punishment.
oh, I've actually interviewed the developers of WWF Warzone, which uses
Oh,
the same engine as those ECW games, and the ECW games are probably the best ones that use that engine. And the problem is, it's like a fighting game in the body of a wrestling game. It was obsolete, and the thing that killed it was those Aki games because they were so easy to control. They mimicked pro wrestling so well that like if those Aki games never had came out, because I remember what life was like before, WCW versus the World and before WCW NWO World Tour. I played a ton of Warzone, WWF Warzone, and Attitude, and I was used to like the combinations and stuff. It was like a fighting game. And then when I played World Tour the first time, I was like, oh my god, this is the way a wrestling game is supposed to be. And fast forward 23 years, 25 years later, I'm waiting anxiously for that AEW game because the same producer on those Aki games is on the development team of the AEW Fight Forever.
yeah.
So,
You mentioned the AW game as well. Do you feel like that was a smart business move with WWE going the whole realistic route and now AW advertising their game as this is the classic stuff you grew up with? Was that a smart
yeah,
business move on AW? Do you think?
I think it guarantees that the game is going to be a million seller. I think a bunch of people are going to go out of their way to pick it up, but then also too, as much as I've enjoyed WWE 2K22 because I own it on PS5, and I love the being able to download all of these wrestlers from the internet and the
Mhm.
showcase mode and all of that stuff, and the games. It's a good game. WWE 2K22 is a very good game. It's a step in the right direction for the series. I'm anxiously waiting for 23. But again, nostalgia. Everyone loves nostalgia now. It's the reason why I write about video games that people haven't played in 20 years. It's the reason why many of my comics are inspired by the comics that I read 30 years ago. So it's just like nostalgia is a big thing now. So I think AEW was incredibly intelligent to adopt that old school gameplay model. Absolutely.
Yeah, I can't wait for the game. Everyone can't wait for the game. I have no doubt it's going to be a great seller. Now, going on to your books as well, I believe the most recent edition of the mine was the PS2 version, if I am
Yes.
correct.
Yes.
Now, the
Mm-hmm.
PS2 was my childhood console, and I want to talk about
Mm-hmm.
the PS2. The
Yeah, man.
PS2 was easily one of the greatest selling consoles. I mean, they were still producing it even into the PS4 lifetime, I'm pretty sure, just at the beginning of it. For
Yeah.
you as a historian on video games, why is the PS2 such a long lasting and honestly iconic console?
Super easy answer. Super easy.
Ooh.
The built-in DVD player.
Really?
Oh yeah. So this is the thing. The PlayStation was one of the first consoles that people could listen to music on. The Sega Saturn you can do it. But there weren't many systems that like utilized the CD player, and the PlayStation totally did. And many people listen to music on their PlayStations. And with all of their internal research, they were like, this was like a big reason why the PlayStation sold so well. That they found that like moms and dads would like listen to music on the TV with it. They'd throw in CDs and listen to music. So the people at Sony were like, how do we have that? How do we have people use the console for more than just games? And somebody at Sony was like, let's let's build in a DVD player in it. And so many people watched movies on their PlayStation 2. And I know people that still to this day watch movies on their PS2. That it's like even though streaming has replaced all of this and stuff, like the house may have like one old crusty DVD player and it happens to be a PS2. So that's one huge reason. Another reason is Sony. So this is the thing. Super Nintendo, amazing lineup of games, was the console of choice for people that appreciated RPGs.
Mm-hmm.
The Sega, the Mega Drive, was the console of choice for people that appreciated sports games. You go to the Nintendo 64, for some reason, Nintendo forgot that people like to play RPGs. There was virtually no RPGs on the Nintendo 64. All of those sexy JRPGs like Final Fantasy, Breath of Fire, Dragon's Quest, those were all on the PlayStation. Great sports titles as well on the PlayStation. So this was the thing. The PlayStation 2 took it into another direction, and they had, again, the best sports games, and they had the best RPGs. Then Sega's demise on top of it brought all of those 2K games to like the Xbox, the GameCube, and the PlayStation as well. So it's just like Sony had amazing first-party games. For the first time in their like console history, they had first-party games that stacked up against Mario by themselves. Because this is the thing, Nintendo will always live and die on Pokemon, Super Mario Brothers, Legend of Zelda, Kirby, Smash Brothers, Mario Party, always. But the PlayStation 2 era, all of a sudden you have God of War, you have the Mark of Cry, you have a whole bunch, you have a whole slew of first party games. Sony is taking chances. So like Ico, Shadow of the Colossus, Katamari Damacy. So you have other publishers coming in and saying like, oh, the PS2, we could have like a big blockbuster on here, but we could also try new and cool different stuff. So Sony was the place where you went. So this was the thing too. The Xbox was where you delivered a game that just looked really freaking great. A lot of developers didn't like to develop on the PlayStation because it wasn't nearly as powerful as the Xbox. So at the same time, you have people like EA that were like, yeah, listen, the game's going to look better on the Xbox, but more people are going to buy it on the PlayStation 2. So what they ended up doing was like shoestringing their games from the PlayStation to the Xbox, which you would go like, it's like dating an ugly woman instead of a beautiful woman that wants to go out with you, you know? But they did that because the PlayStation was just where the players were at. And one of the big reasons, and it's the reason why Microsoft decided to put the DVD player in the Xbox as well, you know? So that was like the entry level. And then they just had a great lineup of first party games and third party games. Everything just came together all at the right time. Then they adapted on the fly. They didn't have built-in internet capability. They developed a network adapter. They didn't have a hard drive built into their console. They developed a hard drive. If you played the PlayStation 2 and you did not play SOCOM, everyone played SOCOM. Everybody played SOCOM. Then on top of it, like I played games on the PS2 online. I bought the hard drive for it. I mean, I literally have about 450 games on the PS2. It's probably like my console. It was my console of choice for quite some time. And again, it's just the controller. Still to this day, is probably one of the best feeling controllers out there ever. It's the reason why Sony continues to just like play off of that design. Just so many things they literally caught lightning in a bottle. And as much as I love the PS3 and the PS3 sold more than the Xbox 360, I'm more impartial to the games that came out on the Xbox 360 than I am the PS3. And I never pick sides in console wars. I tell people all the time, joking around, I'm like, I'm a whore. If the games are there, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go there and I'm gonna play them. I'm not a Nintendo fanboy. I'm not a Sony fanboy. I go where the games are. I own a Switch. I own a PS5. Like again, 25,000 games on this thing. I go where the games are, and the PS2 for that time was where the games were.
Exactly.
Bottom line.
The players will always go with the games, or no matter what the console.
Yeah.
If it's a game that's got a story and accessibility, everyone's going to go for it. You mentioned
Absolutely.
the PS2 hard drive. From my knowledge, I understand that a little game called Final Fantasy 11, an MMORPG. PS2 was the main reason for that thing. They literally had to build the fucking thing to get the game running.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you feel like that was such a big leap for the PS2 with Final Fantasy 11?
Yes, but to be fair, Final Fantasy 11 was pretty much like an unmitigated disaster. And it's like I bought the hard drive to play Final Fantasy 11, and for some reason I just could never get it to run the way that I needed it to run. And yeah, I couldn't play the game. Like I still own Final Fantasy 11. It's in the man cave right now, and I don't think I've played it longer than like a half hour. It just ran like utter trash. But then I quickly realized, oh my god, um, I have the network adapter, I have the hard drive. I'm gonna play EverQuest Online Adventures, or now um, I could download rosters for NBA 2K5 and NBA 2K6. Now and it was just like the hard drive opened up a whole, or even better, a lot of people don't know that you can do this. I can transfer my PS1 saves from my PS1 memory card to my hard drive. I could totally clear out both memory cards that I have, back up everything on the hard drive, and then I can basically play whatever I want whenever I want. So it was just like the hard drive for me just opened up a slew of possibilities. Like I'm the type of person, whenever I have a system, like I have a PS5 now for probably like a month and a half, and the hard drive's full. Like I have that many games on it, that many saves and stuff, and it was just like the file sizes for everything on the PS2 were so small that it was like almost next to impossible to fill it up. And like I said, 450 games, and I still, like, my PS2 hard drive isn't full yet. So it was just, it opened up. So despite the fact that Final Fantasy 11 wasn't what it was supposed to be, it was like a major turnoff to me, because Final Fantasy 10 is so underrated. It's so good. Minus Blitzball. Let's not even talk about Blitzball.
Oh god, no.
But like the actual story of the games, so great. The hard drive just made the PS2 feel really new and special and different. So yeah.
I mean, I dare to ask, did you play Final Fantasy 14 1.0 when that originally launched in its
No.
crazy state?
Yeah, no, I didn't. Sadly, that's the thing too. It's just like people all the time are asking me like, "What are you playing right now?" And I'm just like, whatever I like, whatever I want on this. Like, and the thing is, it's just like this week that just passed, I probably played PlayStation 5 for like a total of like 3 minutes. Like I was playing Spider-Man, Miles Morales for like 3 minutes. I'm just web slinging, and then it's just like my son wanted to play, and I was like, that's more important. I love gaming. Whenever I have a free moment, I try and game between like voice acting in WrestleQuest, being a full-time college professor, promoting these books, running a comic book company. It's like if I have 20 minutes to myself, I'm usually just like resting. So it's just
You
like
need it that week.
it's rough. But I mean, if we go back 15, 18 years ago, like that was my 2-3 hours a day. Like when I was done with all of my work, and it's like 11 o'clock at night, I'm going to stay up until 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm going to play SOCOM. I'm going to play EverQuest, or I'm going to play Final Fantasy X, or I'm going to play Max Payne, or I'm going to just cause some havoc in Grand Theft Auto, or I'm going to play Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, or I'm going to play Diablo, and, and like or I'm going to play Fallout, like that's where I would go. And those memories, like the fact that I've been able to interview many of the people on those games that I've just mentioned, to me, I feel like that's been just as rewarding to me to share those experiences in book form as playing the game. So
yeah, of course, absolutely. You mentioned a lot of classic games there for yourself, but for me, what's interesting about the PS2 as well, not only were like the first party games well, but like the movie tie-in games that were on that console as well were very solid. King Kong, Spider-Man, and even the Star Wars Revenge of the Sith battle game as well.
You're so funny, because like the guy that did Revenge of the Sith, Tony Barnes, also did Buffy the Vampire Slayer on Xbox. He also did Desert Jungle and Urban Strike on the Mega Drive. He also did Strider on PS4, and he's also a very good friend of mine. And I just starred in his recent game BPM Boy on the Atari VCS. So it's just like, you have good taste, my friend. And then Spider-Man 1 and 2 on PS2, Tomo Murawaki, I interviewed him in the PS2 book. So it's just like, you have excellent taste. You have excellent taste.
God. Look, Spider-Man 2, so good. I mean, I remember when Spider-Man PS4 was coming out, and everyone was thinking, "Can it surpass 2? Is it going
Yeah,
to
and it
be the
does.
best Spider-Man game?" And
Yeah,
it's
it
still,
does, but it's just like it has so much Spider-Man 2 in its DNA,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
exactly. I also even that King Kong game as well. Like surprising how good
Super
that was.
underrated.
Oh yeah.
Super underrated. Really fun. I can't even pronounce it properly, and I'm an English professor. Atmospheric first-person shooter. Like you feel like you're in the jungle and he's coming after you, you know? So I love that game so much that I own it on PS2 and Xbox 360. So, yeah. And it's super underrated. I got it for like $10 on both consoles, you know? So,
Yeah, it's weird how underrated that game is as well. I
mhm.
implore everyone, try and play it any way you
Yeah.
can, eBay,
Yeah.
whatever.
It
Definitely give
just
it a
feels
shot.
good. It's like that's the thing with the first person shooter. The shooting needs to really feel good, and
Mhm.
yeah, it's rewarding. Like when you start picking off things with like the machine gun and stuff, you're like, yeah, like this is a good first person shooter. And one of the reasons for that, I mean, Ubisoft, super underrated. They make some of the prettiest games in video game history, and even on the PS2, towards the end of the PS2 lifespan, that is still a really good looking game by today's standards. So
Yeah, absolutely. As well, people, using the capabilities of the programming and everything and using it to its full effect and getting your
yes,
money's worth pretty much.
sure.
Now, obviously, for the PS2 as well, some wrestling games would come out as well. SmackDown versus Raw and, 06, 08, 07 and all that jazz.
Hmm.
For wrestling games on the PS2, do you feel like it was the best next step, or do you feel like some missteps happened for wrestling games on the PS2?
I don't feel like PS2 wrestling games are nearly as good as people think that they are.
Mm.
I think SmackDown versus Raw and stuff, those are fun. I owned all of those. The SmackDowns before them, like Shut Your Mouth, Here Comes the Pain, very good wrestling game, arcade style. It's a bit overrated, in my opinion. Because, like, again, I'm a purist, so the Revenge, No Mercy, WrestleMania 2000. Those are my jams. I think Def Jam Vendetta is better than probably like Def Jam Vendetta and Fight for New York are better than probably more than half of the wrestling games from WWE on the PS2. Also, during that time, there was a wrestling game called Galactic Wrestling on the PS2, and it was also called Ultimate Muscle on the GameCube, and that was a wrestling game based on a very old anime from the 80s. You may remember Muscle on the NES. Um, the Aki guys that did No Mercy developed that game, and that was on PS2 and GameCube. That is an excellent wrestling game. If you love those Aki games, I would suggest playing that rather than probably like the first 2 or 3 WWE games on the PS2, which again are enjoyable, but they're not nearly as rewarding. And then like by the time we get to like SmackDown versus Raw, like 2006, 2007, 28, 21, like there's not a lot of gameplay innovation. There's not a lot of changes. The loading time in those games is absolutely awful. You could make a sandwich in the time that you're waiting for those games to load up. But again, rich character customization. I was one of those guys that I would go online to the forums and download like the recipes so you can make the characters. I love those games. I had a ton of fun with them. But like looking back, they have not aged nearly as gracefully um, as those old WCW games or those early WWF games on the Nintendo 64.
Sometimes nostalgia is a blinding factor in a lot of people's
Sure.
eyes.
Yeah.
But I've played that Ultimate Muscle game. I always played the Black Star, Black Typhoon kind of character. That
Yeah.
definitely love that game. No complaints
It's a
of it. It's
great game.
fun.
Nobody plays it. Nobody even knows it even exists, you know? So I'm happy that you do. So again, you're good. You're good, you.
I try my best. I try my best. I love to delve into everything I can. RPGs. The only game type I'm terrible at is fighting games. I kind
Hmm.
of get a fighting game around me. I love Mortal Kombat. I love the whole story and lore, but playing it, I just play Sub Zero and just spam square. All I can
Oh
do.
yeah. Sure. Absolutely.
But going on to those SmackDown and Raw games, they would go up and be yearly releases. Do you feel like that was a massive hindrance? Obviously you mentioned no innovation and all that. Do you feel like they could have avoided that, or was it just we're making money, we might as well just go with that plan
Oh
model?
yeah. Absolutely. I mean, the whole model changed because and the thing is EA started it. EA started it in like 1993 where they're like, "Yo, listen." And they started it even before 1993 because Earl Weaver Baseball, which was like their big hit on the PC, they started to release floppies with roster updates in like 1988, 1989. You know, not a lot of people know about this, but that's what they used to do. So by the time we get to the Genesis and the Super Nintendo and we get like Madden, then Madden 2, Madden 92, Madden 93, they're like, yo, listen, because what happened was from their market research, they didn't feel that like people would buy a new game every year. And then Michael Brook, the assistant producer, later the producer on the original NHL series, Madden. He did the NFL series for Sega. He did uh, some hockey games on Nintendo 64. He was like one of like Trip Hawkins, like the founder of Electronic Arts. He was one of his like right hand men, and was like, no, enough changes in baseball, football, basketball, hockey every year that we can release a new game with a new roster update and add a couple of gameplay features, new gameplay features, and people will buy it. And they were absolutely right. And they're still absolutely right. But the thing is too, with wrestling, does enough change in a year? And that is completely subjective, because sometimes you'll look at certain years and you'll go, nothing changed. Like if you look at like WCW 94 to like 95, 94 to 95 to 96, 97, 96 to 97, NWO, the Four Horsemen start to get some new members. Some people leave, some people leave. The Dungeon of Doom is no longer a thing. Now there's this influx of characters coming in and out. WWE 93 to 94 changes tremendously because you have a lot of the old guys leave and go to WCW. Now you have the new generation. You have Jeff Jarrett, Bret Hart, Owen Hart, British Bulldog, all getting like main event pushes. But some years you're just like, okay, what's changed? I mean, a lot of people felt like away from all of the layoffs in WWE 2020 to 2021, what really changed? And they didn't release a game in 2021.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was probably the best thing that they could have done. Have those 2 years off to really like redefine the gameplay system. And I think Ukes, one of the reasons why they left to work with AEW is because they were just burnt out. They were doing this. They felt like that they were doing the same thing every year. So I think with certain promotions, I think like if you came out with like before, Ring of Honor was purchased by AEW, if they came out with one Ring of Honor game every like 2 or 3 years, I think that would be okay as long as they supported like roster updates and stuff.
Yeah.
I think Impact is way overdue for a new game. And the thing is too, that Impact game, a lot of people don't know, featured some amazing developers. We're talking about like Mark Turmel, who created NBA Jam, was one of the lead developers on that Impact game. That Impact game sold over 1 million copies. That Impact game had a lot of like extremely positive things going on for it, and then they just never did a sequel. A sequel is in development. It got canceled. But again, Impact is a company too that like if you put out a game every 2 years and supported it, it would probably work. But 2022 to 2023, yeah, with all the people that they brought back and this and that, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, so some years it could be a hindrance, some years it could be a great thing. So,
Yeah.
but the thing is, it's hard to change a game every single year, And the thing is, the development teams change so much that, and a lot of people don't keep track of the names. I'm one of those people that keep track of the names. And WWE 2K23 is going to be better than 22. But if they keep the same development team together, WWE 24, 2K24, whatever they call it, if that's not the best game that this team can put together, then they need to move on to another team. That's like the old credo in video game development that like if you keep a team together long enough to produce 3 games in 3 years and they can't hit the sweet spot, they're never going to hit it. So I feel like 22 was beginning to hit that sweet spot. 23 may get really close. 24 has the best opportunity to do it. So that's one of the reasons why 2K was so, I don't want to say not reluctant, but they didn't sweat it when Ukes left, because Ukes was working on the franchise for 17, 18 years, and they had delivered a couple of really solid bangers. But then it's just like, how many times can you do it in 17 years? So it was about time to make that split. So so that's the same thing for the AEW game. This one is probably going to be a lot of fun. The next one will be better. The third one should probably be the best one. So that's just the way it works. I hope I answered your question.
Hey, it's like what they say in the rule of comedy. The rules is free. You do everything 3 times and it's perfect, but if you keep going on, it's a bit stale and never going to
Yeah.
hit the same.
Yeah.
For obviously, we're going to 2K23 this year for WWE and 2K24. For yourself, actually looking at like the business and of video games and everything, what kind of elements should they include in that to make its purchase worthy?
There's just been so many comings and goings,
Mhm.
and man, as soon as I popped in WWE 2K22, I was like, the roster's it's outdated already, and it's hard. But like they need to be as on top of that stuff. And see, the thing is, like, I feel like they would get more people to play and they would get more people to play longer if they limited microtransactions and if they limited the different additions they have of it, and it was just like you got a great game right out of the right out of the box. It doesn't happen nearly as much, and you could thank companies like EA for doing things like that and just layering their games with microtransactions. But I really feel like 2K could rejuvenate the idea of having a great game right out of the box. And I think a lot of publishers would follow suit. I feel like if people, especially critics, if they turned on WWE, 23, and you had 65 wrestlers, 75 wrestlers out of the gate,
Mhm.
and you didn't have to pay for this and you didn't have to pay for that, blah, blah, blah. And they wrote their reviews and they basically like lauded 2K for that and been like, yo, not lauded, that's the wrong word, but they appreciated that. More people that haven't played the games in a long time, a lot of those old crusty fathers that were like, oh, back in my day, they would want to go pick up the game, and those are the people that are buying the games for their sons and their daughters.
Mhm.
So I feel like that's one of the things that like I would be looking for, like a bigger, better game out of the box that isn't forcing me to spend $50 more to get the entire experience, because I've already paid $79.99 for the game. Why should I have to spend another $50 on it? So the showcase mode is awesome. The creative mode is awesome. They have the whole blueprint for a great game, but then it's just like you open up the game and it's like 30 characters. Like only half the roster is available in the beginning, and it's just a gut punch that like you get so hyped to play the game, and then you're just like, oh, this character is not available. This character is not available. Like if they just changed that model and kind of went back to basics and gave people that are paying their hard-earned money something fuller out of the box, I think they would retain more people and they would sell more copies. That's just me.
Nice. Nice. That's a good point to have. And we don't want a Marvel vs. Capcom or Street Fighter situation where the characters are just locked on the disc and hidden behind
Yeah.
some crap.
Oh yeah.
Because
Mm-hmm.
that's a pain in the ass. God damn,
True.
I hate that shit.
I don't think anybody ever wants to deal with that. You know.
Mm-hmm.
So
Nice.
it's old. It gets old after a while. You know.
Very much so, my friend. Very much so. Now, also,
Yeah.
we got AEW, WWE, but you mentioned WrestleQuest. This is a game I'm very
Yes.
interested in, and you're
Yes.
involved with it as well, my friend. And,
Yeah, man. I'm the voice of. I mean, last time I checked, it was like 90 characters in the game. So it's pretty wild the way that it happened. I had just done voiceover for this really fun retro survival horror game
okay.
called The Padre. That's on PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and I know the Mega Cat guys for quite some time. I love that company, and the owner of Mega Cat reached out to me. He's like, "Oh, you're doing voiceover now?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And I ended up doing some trailers for them, and I did some writing on a project that I can't discuss, because it's still in production and stuff like that. But they were like, "Oh, we got this wrestling RPG. You want to do some voices for it?" And at first, it was like all the like NPCs. So I'm
Mhm.
doing grunts and this and that and the other thing, and it's so much fun. And then it's just like, "Oh, do you want to do some of like the main characters in the game?" And I'm like, "Sure, let's do it." And then it's just like, "Can you do a Macho Man?" And I'm just like, "Absolutely." And then it's just like, "Oh, can you do a Coco Beware?" Yes. Can you do a Road Warriors? Yes. And then it just like kept adding on and on and on and on. And it's been so much fun. I mean, I got to do panels at PAX East and PAX West about like wrestling, the history of wrestling video games with those guys. Like I love that team. The writing on WrestleQuest is excellent. Zach Manko, the lead writer, is one of the best writers in video games today. No one knows who he is. You will know who he is
Mhm.
by the time WrestleQuest is over. It's just this combination of games like Chrono Trigger, Earthbound, Final Fantasy, Breath of Fire, Pokemon, Paper Mario, mixed with pro wrestling. and you add in over 30 licensed pro wrestlers like Jake the Snake Roberts, Jeff Jarrett, Diamond Dallas Page, British Bulldog, Junkyard Dog, Jake the Snake Roberts, and it's so much fun. I cannot wait for May. One of my biggest goals as a voice actor, and I've done trailers for probably like 20 games, and I've done voiceover on probably like a dozen. I've done lead voiceover on probably, I want to say, like 4 games,
Mm.
five games, but they're all digital releases, and it's really cute to go over somebody's house and have them buy a game on the PlayStation Store, the Nintendo eShop, and like, oh, that's me, you know. But I want to go in a GameStop and see one of the games I've worked on, you know,
Yeah, I hear you.
and this is my best opportunity at that happening, so I'm super excited for that. And I was at MagFest with the team in September, and they had the new build of WrestleQuest, and I got to play it for the first time. And oh, there's like new UI, there's like updated visuals, and it's just every time I see the game, it just gets better and better. So I am beyond excited. And the thing is, I don't think I've ever worked on a terrible game. I've worked on a couple of games where I was just like, yeah, it's probably not the best game in the world, but it's just like if I did not do lead voiceover on WrestleQuest, I would still pre-order it. That's how good it is. You know, like I just did voiceover on World Championship Boxing Manager 2 that just got released on Steam. It's coming out on Switch. I voiced like Sugar Ray Robinson and Rocky Marciano, and that game is a ton of fun if you're a boxing sim. So good. And I'm excited for that. But it does help that I did voiceover on it, you know.
Yeah, I hear
Um
you.
I would buy it anyway, but it does help that I did voiceover on it. WrestleQuest, oh my god. Oh my god. I'm a fanboy for it. Every time I see people playing it, I'm just like, oh, this is so much fun. So
Well,
yeah,
hey,
man.
I'm definitely going to get it myself for my PS5, and as soon as I see your name in the credits, I'm going to stand up and give a wee round of applause
Thank
for
you. It means a
100
lot,
plus
man. I
characters.
it's been 2 years working on this game for me. So I've put more work into this game than any other game I've done voiceover on. So I'm very proud of my work on it, and it's a really it's a 50 plus hour RPG. You know, so it's just like when people come over to the booth and they play it, they're like, "Oh, this is cute. Is this on mobile?" And I'm just like, "Bro, it's a 50-hour plus RPG. This is the real deal. This is not some cutesy cash grab because it's got 30 licensed wrestlers in it, you know?
Mhm.
This isn't like a cute game that uses, pixel art and stuff. This is a legit JRPG designed by an American team that loves RPGs, and they love pro wrestling. This game should have came out like 30 years ago. That's how great of an idea that this is. Like, why did no one do this 30 years ago? You know? Um, and I'm happy that they didn't, because then I wouldn't have been old enough to do voiceover on it. So Mega Cat's totally got like lightning in a bottle. This is going to be something really special. I'm super thankful that they asked me to be a part of it, and I'm super grateful that if I never voice act again, if this is the last game that I ever do, um, I'm cool with that. I can't
Wow.
believe I just said that out loud and I just even thought it in my head. But yeah, if something happens and I'm never able to do voice acting ever again, this is like a great way to go out. So I'm
Wow.
not going out. I'm consistently looking for more voice acting opportunity, but I'm just saying that's how good it is.
Yeah, I mean, I can't wait for this as well. I mean, this was the PS2 era. That would be in one of them platinum boxes as well, and
Oh yeah.
bestsellers. Sure.
Oh yeah.
I'm excited for
Absolutely.
WrestleQuest. I
Mm-hmm.
cannot wait. Now, let's get on to Legacy Comics and your
Yeah.
wrestling comic, The Job.
The job.
How
Oh
so The Job, beautiful, beautiful. So I know The Job was a Kickstarter idea as well. Was that so what was the whole
well,
story around that?
the job story begins way before we started Legacy Comics.
Mm,
So I have friends in theater in New York City. I have covered Broadway, off Broadway for as long as I can remember. I am like the biggest. I love theater. I love Shakespeare. Like I love seeing live performances. Um, back in the day before kids and stuff, I would go to my wife all the time. Like if we had nothing to do, I would be like, "You want to go see a play?" And she would go, "Well, what do you mean?" I'm like, at one point I can get tickets to like pretty much any off Broadway play in New York City, like at a moment's notice, you know. And I met some amazing people, and I met an actor by the name of Matt DeRogatis, um, who was in like what is it? Hot tin cat on a hot tin roof right now, like off Broadway. He's in a production right now. It's getting ready to start, and we would just talk all the time about he loves wrestling, and we would talk about wrestling, and we would talk about life, and we would talk about, you know, two guys. We talk about women. We talk about all sorts of crazy stuff. We talk on the phone. We talk on Facebook. Great guy. And it was like right after like my second book came out in like 2019, right around Halloween time, and he's just like, "Why have you never written a play?" And I'm like, "I hate you." And he's like, "Why?" I'm like, "When do you need it by, Matt?" And he's like, "You serious?" And I'm like, "Yeah. When do you need it by?" And he's like, "Oh, like Thanksgiving." So he's basically giving me like 20 days to write a play. I'm like, "You got it." So I sat down for like 2 days, and I'm just like, and then he's just like, "Oh, I want you to write a play that like I could be in." And I'm like, "Okay, all right, I got you." So I love films like French Connection, Dog Day Afternoon, Reservoir Dogs, Point Break, Heat, um, bank robbery movies. Like I love stuff like that, you know. Um, and I love pro wrestling. So I'm just like, gotta think of something fun, something everyman. And I'm just like, what about if we write about a jobber, a guy that loses every match, but he's not your normal jobber. He's actually really good, but he's just not getting a push. And he's so good because he's so good for a variety of reasons, because he's got this like mega smoking hot valet, and he just can't win a match. For some reason, he's just not getting a push. And whenever he shows up to like the arena or the gym or wherever they're wrestling, people are like, "Yo, he's got a really nice car too. How does this guy afford the gear? How does he afford the hot wife? How does he afford the car?" And the answer is simple: they rob banks together. His wife is his valet in the ring, and outside the ring, she's the getaway driver. And this is the way they fund their wrestling obsession. Dan Dero just wants to wrestle. His wife just wants to see him happy. And the only way that they're going to finance their American dream is by robbing banks. During the day, he's the a superintendent of a building in Brooklyn. He fixes leaky faucets, he fixes toilet bowls, he drywalls, um, he paints apartments, and it pays their rent. And the money that they make wrestling, that pays for, like, you know, their gear, and like they don't need extra money. They're getting by frugally. They're eating oodles of noodles and ramen every night, and they love each other. They don't have cable. They just spend time with each other, and they love pro wrestling. Dan's got like a mountain of pro wrestling DVDs, and he studies and she studies, and they want to do this, but they can't. They're just not getting a push. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that Dan's like 5'10", and wants to like use the super kick. The super kick is his thing. And his wife reminds him all the time, "You've got like stubby short legs. You shouldn't be using the super kick." And he's just like, "But it's always been the super kick. It's always been the super kick. I have to use the super kick." And she's like, "Listen, use the dragon sleeper. Use the dragon sleeper. Use ground and pound maneuvers." And he's like, "I can't do that. That's not who I want to be." And for that reason, he'll go to like a promoter and be like, you know, oh, they'll be like, "Oh, what's your finish, kid?" And he'll be like, "Oh, the super kick." And they'll be like, like you, the super kick? Like, yeah. And he refuses to change. So he's like never going to like get booked to the top of the card. But they're really, really good at robbing banks. Like they're great. And the thing is, people go like, why do they never get caught? And it's a testament to Beverly, his wife's ingenuity.
Mhm.
She's a great driver. She cases places. She like finds out where the exits are and stuff. They're in and out. But also Dan's never recognized because Dan wears a different lucha libre mask with every robbery. So every robbery, it could be Tiger Mask one time, and then maybe Rey Mysterio another, and then maybe Blue Demon the next. And it's just like he's got a different mask on every single time. For some reason, he knows where all the exits are. He's in and out. He knows when the security guards are at lunch. Blah blah blah. blah. So it's just like it's a lot of fun. Um, so that's kind of like the story of the job. So I build this as a play. I wrote it as a play,
Mhm.
and then I show it to Matt DeRogatis, and he's like, "Oh my god, bro, this is great!" Da, 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 da. And we're looking for a theater, and we're looking for a producer, and we're like confident, like this is gonna happen, and like we were gonna have some indie guys, actually wrestle in the production. We were gonna have Matt train to become a wrestler for it. We were gonna have a partial ring set up in on stage, so like that you could have like parts of matches in the ring. Like it was gonna be great. And then COVID happened, and the
The
theater,
break off of 2020. My God.
yeah, and the theater business just basically bottomed out in New York City. But then I ended up getting a job at lesser known comics,
Mhm.
um, and I pitched them Condry, which is like Legacy Comics. Now it's Legacy Comics, like one of our flagship series, alongside The Job and Legend of the Night Owl and Brooklyn Bleeds, um, and Godfoe. But anyway, um, and I pitched it to the people at lesser known comics, and they were like, no, that sounds really good, but it's wrestling. Do people really want to read it? Blah blah blah. And I was just like, yeah. So I was the top comic at lesser known comics. Condry was crushing it, killing it. Um, and I was just like, if I can't do another series, I don't know if I want to be here anymore.
Mm.
So I ended up crafting a business plan with somebody else, and we ended up going to Kickstarter, and we got funded in like 2.5 hours. We were ultimately like 300% funded, and one of the books in our Kickstarter was The Job Zero, and it's one of our best-selling comics. We did issue 0 with Kieran X. Quinn, who's an amazing artist. He does Condry with me now. But then what ended up happening was I met Steve Conjay,
Mhm.
who ended up doing a couple of variant covers for us, and he did our Dracula comic, Renfield Vision of Madness, which we actually got the approval of the Bram Stoker estate. We used unpublished notes from Bram Stoker himself to write that comic. Really crazy stuff. And just like working with Steve on that comic and seeing his attention to detail and his attention to anatomy, and wrestling is all anatomy.
Mhm.
You have to know like where a head goes for a DDT. You have to know like where the foot goes for, a Yakuza kick and blah, blah, blah. I was like, this guy would be able to do a great wrestling book. And the thing was, Kieran, who I love, he's one of my favorite artists to work with. He was working on 3 series at once with us. Like he was like Daniel Bryan, like circa like 2014. He's like wrestling 2-3 times a night. And it's just like, I don't want Kieran to die of exhaustion. So we decided to take Kieran off of the job and just leave him on Condry and Legend of the Night Owl. And that's worked out beautifully for us because we could have him on Condry, one cycle, and then the next, Legend of the Night Owl. But then I
Mhm.
was like, I need somebody to do the job and to do it well because I believe in the story. So Steve Conjay does the job number 1, and the job number 1 is so much fun. He's working on the job number 2 as we speak. It's totally been penciled and inked. It's being colored and lettered as we speak. I have the entire first arc, like the first 6 issues of the job already written. So we're in a really fun place. So my pitch for the job is, if you like those films that I mentioned, um, and you like 90s pro wrestling, um, it's very like ECW meets like Point Break with Patrick Swayze and Keanu Reeves, not that crappy remake that they made.
Oh.
So it's like if you combine those two, that's kind of like what the job is. So there's a lot of tongue in cheek moments. Like there's one moment where like Dan tells the teller, "Fill up the bag or you're gonna lose your smile," you know, and yes, so I love the face you just made, because if you're a pro wrestling fan, you're like, yeah, this guy
Uh,
loves wrestling, you know, and there's a moment where like Dan is like doing like a super kick motion, like with like no shirt on and like sweatpants in the bedroom, like with Beverly. He's like, one day, like a kid is gonna have a picture of this in their room, and Beverly's like, all I see is a dirty foot and you ain't no sexy boy, so it's just like there's lots of like fun moments like that where you're just like, this guy loves wrestling. He loves old school cinema. And he knows how to tell a story. And then the art by Kieran in issue 0 and the art by Steve in issue 1 is just, it's awesome. And I'm super excited for issue 2, which we're aiming for right now for like a summer release. But it's available in physical format, it's available in digital format, and then we have this like sexy, super sexy thing where we have trading cards. And so the thing is, it's a trading card in the front, and then you flip it over to the back, and there's a QR code on the back of the card. You scan it, and the comic will open up right on your phone. So we know there's tons of people that love physical comics, but then we know there's also people that like, they just want to read it. So they can get the digital format. But then you have people in the middle that are like, I want something that I can collect. And then at the same time, too, I don't want just a digital file, because what if I lose it? So like, now you have something that's collectible, and whenever you want, you just flip it over and you scan it. You keep it in your wallet. You keep it like wherever you want, So we're super excited for people to get that experience. And like for me, it's like, as much as I love the Condry series, it's like, it without Condry, we don't have a Legacy Comics, because the success of that series with Lesser Known helped. Like, it was our best-selling comic. It was the only comic anyone knew about before we got to Kickstarter. So it basically was the reason why our Kickstarter was successful. But the job has been like on fire the past 3 months. So many people like it. Like I've had AEW wrestlers, I'm not going to say their name, but they've come to my house and they've been like, I want my copy of the job. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, you're going to sign it for me? I'm like, yeah, sure. Boom. So I have wrestlers that want to read the job, like real wrestlers, and it's just like, it's so much fun that's like actually happening. So yeah, man, it's a super fun series. And my thing is, like, if you like professional wrestling, you'll love the job. If you don't like wrestling, you'll love the relationship between Dan and his wife, because she just wants what's best for her husband, but she's brutally honest. So it's kind of like if you've ever watched American sitcoms like Mike and Molly, or like Two Broke Girls. They have this very honest relationship with each other. And Bev is anything but like, it's like, as much as I love Miss Elizabeth and Macho Man, Miss Elizabeth just stood there and looked pretty. It was very rare, and like she cried, like Macho Man was being hurt. Oh no, but Bev is like the type of woman that, like, if she sees her husband being taken advantage of, she's gonna get involved, and she doesn't take any crap. And she's like, almost like, imagine if like Marissa Tomei from My Cousin Vinny and like Maurice, the Mrs. Wife, combined. That's kind of like what, to me, like what Beverly represents. She loves her man, she'll stand by him, and she's gonna tell him like the way things are. So it's a lot of fun watching the two of them. So I love that series. I'm super excited about the future of it.
Nah, man. I mean, I'll say it might get this episode demonetized, but that's so fucking cool.
Thank you.
It's great to see the job's doing so well. Obviously, you mentioned the first arc of these 6 issues that you've got planned. Further down the line, is there more arcs planned, or is it seeing how the sales?
Oh yeah. Well, I tell everyone, because people have asked me like, "Oh, you doing another issue of this? Are you doing another issue of that?" And it's super hard being a CEO of a company, because you have to look at your creations and say, if that's not selling, it's got to go.
Yeah.
And we've been a company for like 16 months now, and I've told people, you got to go. I've looked at like the sales of certain books and been like, we're not going to do another one. The Job has been one of our best sellers, like since it's come out. So The Job 2 is definitely coming out. And if sales continue, then we will finish the first arc. But like, we almost kind of have to take it by an issue by issue basis. It's just like, I can't have blind faith and be like, oh, well, maybe the next one's going to sell, because it's just like, when you're running a company like out of your home and you're trying to be as smart as possible, you've got to stay with what sells. So it's just like, I've had so many people that I've done the pitch to, and they're like, oh, The Job sounds really cool. And then I'll tell them, and I'll never beg, but I'll tell them, if you like it, buy it, because it might not exist if you don't. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, it costs money to print comics. If you like it, it may not be here tomorrow. But if you support it and you tell people about it and you share it, and we can sell out a print run, then it guarantees that the next one's coming out. You know, it's like I tell people all the time, the reason why the job one issue one exists is because job zero sold well. The reason why we're making a job two is because job one sold well. If job two sells 15 copies and I have, 500 copies in my house that I can't sell, why am I going to do another one?
Exactly.
So like right now we're in a really good spot where like people really like it, but I'm like, the big struggle for any entrepreneur or content creator is to consistently get new eyes. And I mean, that's why I'm on this podcast. That's why I have my own, comic book podcast. That's why, like, I am constantly pitching. It's just like one of the reasons why Marvel Comics has consistently been the number one comic book company in the world for the past 70 years, 60, 70 years, is because they had a pitchman in Stan Lee. Stan Lee would pitch them to Hollywood. He would pitch them. He would do whatever. He's like the Ryan Seacrest of, or you could even say that Ryan Seacrest is the Stan Lee of, American Idol. I can't imagine American Idol without Ryan Seacrest. The same way I can't imagine Stan Lee and Marvel not being together. And the thing is, like, you look at DC Comics and they've had so many successful comics and stuff like that, but they've never had like that pitchman like Stan Lee. And if you look at Image Comics was built upon 7 amazing artists that like people stopped reading Marvel and DC. Image Comics on 2 separate occasions was the number 2 comic book company in the entire world because people wanted to read and see Todd McFarlane. They wanted to read and see Robbie Liefeld. They wanted Jim Valentino. They wanted Willis Portacio. They wanted Mark Silvestri. I'm trying to remember who else. And how could I forget Eric Larson? I mean, like Venom would not have a tongue without Eric Larson. So my whole thing is, it's just like I'm trying to be the Todd McFarlane or the Stan Lee of Legacy and go on as many podcasts as possible and to spread the gospel and to let people know that we're working really hard on delivering amazing comics. We need eyes, and so far, like I tell people who go to me all the time, oh man, you this must be killing you, blah blah blah, and I'm like, no, we're doing business the right way, like I mean, I've seen financial reports from companies that I used to work for that I'm just like, yeah, I would be divorced if my company was in that situation. I've spoken to people that have told me, Pat, listen, comic books are a hard sell. Like they're not making like a ton of money. And I'm just like, well, you don't have to make a ton of money. You have to make enough money to continue to print. You have to make enough money to be able to pay all of your people, to maintain your social media, and to print the next issue. You have to do that for like at least the first 3 to 5 years, because sometimes people may not want to buy like just the job 0, but if they see the job 0, 1, and 2, then they're like, oh wait, this is an experience. So you have to keep the lights on for a good 3 to 5 years and produce enough content to have a library of content for people to really see like what you're capable of. And that's why I'm so excited that like, because Condry, we're up to issue 5. The Job, we're working on issue 2. Brooklyn Bleeds, we've done 2 issues. We're working on another issue. Night Owl, we have issues 0 and 1. So like we're starting to build those libraries. But like again, not to my own horn, but man, like when people see like the Job 2 is going to be really, really awesome. And like the Job 1 just turned it up from like Job 0 is like a really good like bite size of like what's to come, but like the Job 1, what we were able to do in 24 pages, I was super proud of. Like we set a new bar for our company and we were able to get it done in like a month. And like that to me is like a great comic book team of writer, artist, inker, colorist, whatever. They can do a comic book a month. And the fact that we were able to start from start to finish, get the job done in a month, like that just shows that like Steve Conjay and I are the real like effing deal. And if you love comics, you'll really appreciate that book. So like I said, if you love wrestling, if you love comics, pick it up, because again, we're doing small print runs, 500, copies or so. Eventually, it's going to change and we're going to have reprints and stuff. But if you get your hands on our stuff on the ground floor, you know, those comics are going to be something special, 5-10 years from now. So the job is something special right now. So
Absolutely, strike with the iron. The iron's hot.
yeah.
Everybody, you're hearing it now.
Oh yeah.
Check out Lexi Comics. Get the job. I'm thinking right now. Dan Darrow. How would he be a guest on this show? How would I be in the world of the job? That'd be an interesting, weird thing to think on my part. I don't know how
Dan was just on a podcast in The Job 2. That's how The Job 2 starts. He's on a podcast, and it's a lot of fun. So maybe he'll be on, maybe he could be on the Soul Sessions for an issue at some point. I don't know. Maybe we could figure that out. So you never know.
No, well, as you know, we'll keep the secrets in this. We won't spoil here. We'll keep the story under wraps, and you never know what may happen.
You never
in
know.
The future. You never know.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, Patrick, something that in the comic book industry that's very common is paperbacks and omnibuses as well, big collections of issues as well. You feel like that's a very good business model to adapt in the future, giving people access of big collections of stories instead of single issues.
Oh yeah. Well, see, the thing is though too, and I've explained this to people, and some people don't listen, and some people insist on doing things their own way. And I've seen so many indie publishers, because I've been really in the comic book industry now for like 2 years. But the thing is, I've been a publisher and a writer for 2 years, but like I've covered the comic book industry for 17 years. Like I've interviewed Peter Hogan of Resident Alien. I've interviewed Michael Oeming. I've interviewed Mark Miller, who did Marvel Civil War. I've interviewed John Bacter, who did My Friend Dahmer. I've interviewed tons and tons. I've interviewed Joe Quesada. I've interviewed David Mack. I've interviewed Jeff Loeb. And we're talking, these are seminal talents. I've interviewed oh my god, his name just completely escaped me. The artist that did The Watchmen. I've interviewed I've interviewed Garth Ennis. I've interviewed amazing comic book people. So just like, I understand the comic book industry. I understand like what you have to do in order to be successful. And I've told people, you could release a graphic novel to start. Mm-hmm. And you could work a year nonstop and do like, what would be considered like 12 issues and just release that all at once. That costs a lot of money. And the thing is, it's just like, if you release single issues and people buy those single issues, they will buy the trade when it comes out. They will buy the omnibus when it comes out. If you stuff that omnibus with a sexy forward, if you throw in bonus art, if you throw in stuff that wasn't in those single issues. So the thing is, it's just like, my father told me a story a long time ago. And it's basically like two lions are at the top of a hill. And they look down at the hill. And the hill is surrounded by just beauty. And like dozens of beautiful lioness. Mm-hmm. And the younger lion says, I'm going to go run down and bag me a lioness. And the older lion goes, no, son, we will walk down the hill together and we will beg them all. So it's just like, if you're creating comics or if you're an entrepreneur, you could play the short game, or you could play your cards smart and say, let's release single issues. Let's build an audience. Mm-hmm. Let's get to as many people as possible. Let's do 1 million podcasts. Let's do 15 podcasts for every issue that we do. Let's do reels and YouTube shorts for every issue that we do. So this way, by the time we get to the trade, we could do a Kickstarter or a GoFundMe or whatever for the trade, and then just throw in like a slew of bonus content and make that trade something really, really special. Instead of just going, oh, hi, we're new. We're going to release a graphic novel. You have no idea who we are. And then and pray that like the chips fall where they may. That's one way of doing it. And I know plenty of people that do it that way, but like I couldn't do it that way. I wouldn't do it that way. Like before, like we'll go back to the minds behind the games really quick. Mm-hmm. By November of 2016, I had the book deal signed for the Minds Behind the Games, the first Minds Behind the Games. It didn't come out until like the end, not the end, early 2018. Mm-hmm. Okay? Because I had to write it, and it wasn't written until like April of 2017, so it took me like 6 months to write it. Once I signed the book deal, I was doing panels at conventions. I must have did 50, easily 50 to 80 podcasts before the book was even released, you know? So it's just like that's one way to promote. Or I could have just been like, well, I'm writing a book and I'll wait until it comes out to do podcast and promote. It's just like it has to be ingrained within you. Your brand has to be an extension of you, and you have to build it every single day. So like Kickstarter isn't enough, podcasts aren't enough, but like you need to just have a contingency plan and just build every single day. And it's just like, to me, it doesn't make sense to do a graphic novel for an IP that like nobody knows. So it's just like Steve and I could have easily been like, you know what, let's not release the job 1 or 0, let's just do a graphic novel. But then it's just like you're not building an army, you know. So I just think eventually we're going to get to like once that first arc finishes, like the job 6, and we have the job 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, then I could go, let's put it all together in a sexy trade paperback, in a sexy omnibus, and release it with unpublished art and a forward from Steve and I, and maybe like another forward from like a sexy, comic book writer or artist or whatever, and just give people something really special. So we try and make every single issue special, and then we try and make the trade special. That's my business model. I hope that answers your question.
No, it's a good business model to have as well. Build yourself up and not just shoot your shot in one go. You try and build
Yeah,
up and build a connection. It's always a good
yeah,
aspect to have. Now,
hmm,
Patrick, I want to end on one final question for you. Down the
sure.
line, say Netflix, Amazon Prime, or even Hollywood come to you and say, hey, we want to adapt the job for media and we want you to pick the cast. Who are you picking for your cast, mate?
So you're gonna laugh. For Beverly, um, Kat Dennings. I love her. From Nikki and Nora's Infinite Playlist on to like Thor and Two Broke Girls. Like if Marissa Tomei was, I'm sorry, Marissa, you're still beautiful. Um, if she was like 25 years younger, Marissa Tomei would probably be Beverly. But Beverly in the comic is like in her early 30s, and I think Kat is a little bit older than that now, but she could totally still do it. I love Kat Dennings. I love her snark. I love her attitude. She's adorable, like in every way, shape, or form. I think she would be a great Beverly. Um, for for Dan, it's pretty crazy because like the person that I would have loved to play Dan is another person that I interviewed a long time ago when I was at NBC. Um, I was one of the last people to interview him before he passed away, and that's Paul Walker. I think
Wow.
Paul Walker would have been an awesome Dan. Um, but I think Channing Tatum could be an awesome Dan too if he grew his hair out a little bit. Um, but then also too, I mean, there's plenty. I would much rather go with like an unnamed actor, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Like I think if Paul Rudd was younger and got jacked, he could be like a really funny, like he would be a cool Dan Dero because you would like never expect him to be able to wrestle. If you imagine him throwing a super kick, you'd be like, "Come on, bro, what are you doing?" You know. But if
Mm-hmm.
he got jacked, because it's like perfect example. Star Lord in Guardians of the Galaxy, Chris Pratt.
Mm-hmm.
When they announced him as Star Lord, I was like, "Stop it, stop it." I love him. I love him in Parks and Rec, but I'm like, no, no. And then he went out and he got jacked, you know? And then it's the same thing with like, I love Josh Brolin. I think he's a great actor. And I'm just like, could he be Cable? And then he went out and he got jacked. And you're like, I can't imagine anyone else playing Cable, you know? Ryan Reynolds could be a great Dan Zero because he's hilarious, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
I think the chemistry between him and Kat Dennings would be pretty funny, you know? Um, so there's a bunch of other characters too in the job. Um, there's like a sleazy wrestling promoter called VK. That's his name, VK.
Oh,
Yeah.
I wonder who.
Um, I wonder who that could be referencing. But like I could totally see like Paul Giamatti being like the sleazy dirtbag, you know, promoter, and then there's a wrestler called the Poppy. That's like he's like kind of like the main villain. Um, and I forgot the actor's name. And I'm so good with names. But if you've ever seen Ant-Man, the Hispanic guy that helps him rob the banks, and he's like super funny and he tells all these crazy
Oh,
stories and stuff like that. Oh my god, he would be perfect for the Poppy. Also, there is a police officer in the job. Um, his name's Janetti. I wonder where that name comes from. Um, and he is an amazing detective, and he's hot on the trail for Dan. He's like watching, like they end up getting like some like shots from like the security cameras and stuff, and he's like he catches like the super kick, and he's like, yo, this guy throws a better super kick than I thought for a guy so short, and blah 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 blah. And he's a wrestling fan, so he goes to like indie shows and stuff, and he like crosses paths with Dan. It's a lot of fun. It's really like it's really well put together, but like it's no accident that that Janetti looks a little bit like Michael J. White. So if you guys know who Michael J. White is, if you've ever seen the Spawn film in the 90s, the guy
no.
that plays Spawn, he's also in I think the name of the movie is Black Dynamite. He plays Black Dynamite in there. Michael J. White would be awesome. Or like I could even see if he was a little bit taller, and I'm sorry that he's so short, Kevin Hart would be pretty funny. He'd be funny as Janetti. But like Janetti's an ass kicker though too. So
Oh,
like
true.
I don't know if I don't know if Kevin Hart, maybe Wesley Snipes. Wesley Snipes hasn't been in a film in a long time.
True.
Like something like that, I would love to see. Like I would just love to hang out with Wesley Snipes. So that would be
I,
my excuse.
that would be a cool one. I mean, I would like to throw in maybe Idris Elba. He's done some good stuff as well.
Idris Elba would be a very good Janetti, you know. So yeah, that's the thing that I like about the job too, because again, it's like this love story of this American couple. They're trying to make their American dreams come true, and they're like doing everything right. They're so good at what they do,
Mm.
and then it's just like every issue we kind of get like Janetti is kind of like I see you. I'm gonna catch your ass. I don't know how I'm gonna catch you, but I'm gonna catch you. Blah blah blah. And then they, like I said, Janetti is a wrestling fan, and he works really hard. And like one of his fellow like police officers is like, oh, that Brooklyn Grappling Association, they're wrestling like down the block, like next week we should go. And he's like, oh, okay, all right, blah blah blah. And they see Dan wrestle and stuff like that, and he's not putting pieces together yet, because Dan loses every match and can't do a super kick, but it's
Mm.
just like, what if Dan wins a match and
Ooh.
Janetti's there? Like will he connect the dots? Like there's so many things going back and forth. It's so funny. Like it's funny. It's like old school 90s crime noir and stuff. It's so much fun. So yeah, to answer your question, like that's kind of like the cast that I would like that I would put together.
It just sounds perfect. I mean, hey, Hollywood Blockbuster is going to get all the Oscar nominations. Screw it, the
From
job
your
for
from
best
your
picture.
from your mouth to Kevin Feige's ears, so
Very much so, my friend. Well, Patrick, I very much appreciate you taking time out of your day to come and tell us about the mind of gaming and the job as well, and just everything about your life and everything. I very much appreciate, my friend. Honestly, thank you for
yeah,
your
man.
time.
Yeah,
And
man, no
all
problem.
our viewers, thanks very much for tuning in for another episode of the Soul Sessions. And who knows, maybe where I'll end up next, maybe in the world of the job. Who knows? But hey,
Absolutely.
spoilers are for another time, shall we say? Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. Remember to check out the job on Legacy Comics website, which will be in the description below. Have a good one, everyone.